First, we'll start with Wisconsin and Florida. Those results overnight reflecting Elon Musk's the limits of his power, if you want to think of it that way. He threw so much money, tens of millions of dollars.
$22 million in the Wisconsin race alone.
Yeah. And so
why didn't he throw it to the Mark Thompson show?
A little something. We can be bought. But that repudiation, John, that's pretty big, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, as I've worked in Wisconsin over the years, many elections, I'm thrilled. It does not augur well for the Republicans. And there's no other spin on it. As for Florida, the fact that the margins were cut so drastically in districts that were gerrymandered is absolutely astounding. And you will note that President Trump withdrew the nomination of his nominee for the United Nations, Stefanik, because he understood that that district might go for the Democrats. So clearly the Republicans are on the ropes, but have no fear. Today, in just about 2 hours from now, Donald Trump will turn the world around. He will announce his tariffs, and we will enter, Mark, a golden age, in the president's words.
Yeah, this is of concern to the entire world because it's likely to throw economies on their side.
Did you hear the Canadian Prime Minister blasting away and saying, we won't be intimidated. We're a sovereign country. We're going to go ahead. But it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. You know what stuns me? It is Congress who has the ability to implement tariffs. And the Congress is definitely silent. And what that's going to mean in 2 years, less than 2 years now for the midterm elections, is that I think the Republicans will face the consequences.
Well, it's actually not completely the solidarity that you saw 2 months ago.
That's for sure.
You're seeing now in Congress, among GOP Congress people, enough, and you only need a handful, as John just has noted, because the margin is so thin. A handful, I'm going to say up to, I think 9 is what I was reading, GOP Congress people who have an issue with turning the keys of the economic kingdom over to Donald Trump in the form
take a look at having on the birthing question
of his
Do you
ability
have a baby?
to just a minute to finish this one thought,
Sure,
please.
Sorry.
How dare you interrupt me? It's my show.
You're right.
What I'm speaking of is his control of tariffs. As you know, John, it's a special condition, an emergency declared, that allows him to proclaim these tariffs and actually bring them into a policy, economic policy. Congress has the power to take back that national emergency, do they not?
The Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930 was repealed in 1933 by a Democratic Congress.
And so this is the rumblings of that. That's what I'm reading about. And so it's very possible that this tariff world that he likes to inhabit, I mean, it seems as though, the one hammer that he swings, that and deportation, there may be a come to Jesus moment for him on that with Congress. But anyway, please continue.
No, I was only going to say, take a look, the whole question of whether a woman who is a member of Congress can vote from home because they're breastfeeding a baby. Well, the answer is that the Republican leadership, in line with Donald Trump, said, no, 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 no. And look, everything is on hold now because 9 Republicans in the House of Representatives said, no, we think you ought to give women the right to feed their child on the House floor. Why not, for God's sake?
Yeah, there you are, those 9 Republicans. So you have in Mike Johnson, he's basically saying, you know what, we're not going to do any votes on it. He's sort of recoiled from leading the parade at this point, John. I took that to mean that Mike Johnson, leader of the GOP, leader of the House, begins to see now cracks in the solidarity.
Yeah. May I make one other point? You all know that Peter Marks from the Food and Drug Administration, the top vaccine regulator in the country, who is the one who created the term warp speed in developing the vaccine against COVID, is now out, essentially forced out. And his comments about being forced out, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he called it irresponsible, detrimental to public health, and a genuine danger to our nation's health. And all I can tell you is these kinds of actions ultimately will come back to haunt the administration. My hope is that it will not also haunt all of us. By the way, here in San Francisco, where many of our listeners are based, You know that they're closing the Health and Human Services office here in San Francisco, and it is a disaster because AIDS prevention, the vaccines, the whole 9 yards, all out the window because of the Trump administration. And I think the fallout from all of this and the backlash from all of this is going to be remarkable. By the way, that office here in San Francisco is in the Nancy Pelosi federal office building, which might give you a hint as to why he targeted it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's funny because one of the things that Musk has declared is that he's going to go after Congress people. He wants to go after legislators. He wants to turn the Doge and Dogettes on Congress people. So in that,
may he have as much luck with that as he had in Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's possible there are limits to his superpower. Let me get back to and I'll
his
get to Corey.
Superpower is money. And
Right.
there comes a time when people turn around and say, wait a minute, you can't buy this election. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, I think that was the case in Wisconsin. I don't know if that's the case for the rest of the country, as you know. But Trump's reaction to the situation with the Signal app and the communications that were to have been secured.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
And his attacks on a federal judge. May I remind you, in that same court, a federal judge by the name of John Sirica was able to expose the Watergate scandal, shut down Nixon, and ultimately cause his resignation. And may I say to you that that is the example that we should be following with federal district court judges. But let me also remind you that you have members of Congress, leading members of Congress, saying, oh, well, these federal district courts are created by Congress. Let's just abolish them. It is the most flagrant action by a Congress as a potential action that I've ever heard.
Well, it's funny that the GOP is okay with a judge in Texas blocking mifepristone, for example, from being mailed nationwide, the abortion pill, if you will. But all of a sudden, when a judge stops Donald Trump's deportation without due process of these Venezuelans, all of a sudden we have an issue with it.
Yes, and now we have an admission they made a mistake. It wasn't just one mistake, it's numerous mistakes. And the idea that a person can be rounded up and deported from this country who is here legally is, to me, absolutely outrageous. And may I make a comment as well about the fact that there are groups that are sharing lists with the administration of people who ought to be expelled. And that includes the people from Beitar, a right-of-center Zionist organization. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. When you are in this country legally, you have the protections. And by the way, even if you're here illegally, you have protections because this is the United States of America. And while I'm at it, let me just tell you something. These roundups that the administration is now pulling off against graduate students, professors, students in general, is a disgrace. Not since the Palmer raids of 1919, when people were rounded up because they were presumed to be communists. And you will recall the Supreme Court, in the ruling that they made in 1920, threw all of that out, said you can't do it. And that was the end of the Palmer raids. I hope the Supreme Court has the courage to do that in this case. This is a blow to American democracy, unprecedented in our history.
Well, it is regressive without question. I mean, this is a regression. This is he's rolling back the clock in this country and taking away many of and doing it honestly with I think, tacit congressional approval. They're so cowed by him, taking away a lot of the protections, the legal protections to which you've referred. And so with the Venezuelans, one's a makeup artist who got swept up, another's a soccer player.
And they're sent to El Salvador,
to
a prison in El Salvador. It's absolutely ludicrous.
And so the rectifying that would seem to be something that would be a priority, but it's actually not the priority of this administration. Their view is, well, you know what? It was an administrative error, but those people are still gang members.
A clerical error, they called it. A clerical error.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and there thank you for putting up that picture. This is the person who is in charge of Homeland Security. Look at her standing in front of what is going on in El Salvador. It was one of the most disgusting displays. She should never have been nominated to head Homeland Security.
So for those just listening, that's Christine Nome. It's a picture of Christine Nome that John is talking about, and it's in front of that, those caged prisoners. They're all shirtless behind her. And this is sort of to advertise how tough America is being with these deportations. But as we just noted, they've screwed this up, and you've now deported innocent people, and there's no mechanism by which those people can be taken back. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous.
Not only that, they're running ads. Kristi Noem has cut an ad defending Donald Trump and defending his policies that is now being run on CBS radio here in San Francisco. I want you to know, Mark, if you and I were still at KGO and they tried to run that ad, I would have protested it. I would have said, not on my show. It is a disgraceful use of money by the government to buy these ads to defend Donald Trump. And Kristi Noem is a disgrace all the way around. I mean, I hate to say it, but every day we run into this more and more and more, and it's just very disturbing.
Why didn't you say something about the Cards for Kids ads that ran over and over on your show? I noticed you didn't say anything about those.
Quite the contrary. I can tell you where I protested.
Mark, let me tell you something. If they ever tried to run those Cards for Kids ads on my show, I would have said no.
No, let me explain to you. When they ran a cancer cure on my show, I had it pulled immediately. Cards for Kids you can argue about, but a phony cancer cure is ridiculous. And I think that's a very important point, that we did have a certain amount of power in order to do that. One other point, you will note that the press secretary to the President of the United States said something, her name is Caroline Leavitt, about this issue of Singlegate. She said the case is closed. I heard that, Mark, and I thought seriously of my old colleague Ron Ziegler, who said that Watergate was a third-rate burglary. The absurdity of what is happening is crazy. By the way, we may be selective. We may have stands that we take. When you hear a phony cancer cure, it's very different than Cards for Kids. Cards for Kids is a legitimate charity. You may differ with it. I never had a real bone to pick with them, but I did over phony cancer cures, and I do over this kind of stuff from Kristi Noem.
The Cards for Kids comment was a poor attempt, I guess, on my part.
I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to say that. It's your show.
Let me go back to. Just want to note, because we're on the mistakes of the administration when it comes to deportation. The Nobel laureate and ex-leader of Costa Rica has had his U.S. visa revoked. Oscar Arias Sanchez, twice president of Costa Rica, has been a vocal critic of President Trump. He described Trump as acting like a Roman emperor. And the American government has revoked his visa to enter the country. No reason was given.
It's a disgrace. By the way, you know about this terrible disaster which has taken place in the Far East. And Donald Trump sent 3, let me count them, 1, 2, 3 aid workers. They've shut down AID. AID can't do what it used to do in a vital moment like this. And we're going to see the same thing with the health crises which are taking place. I'm just so mortified by all of this. I can't even begin to tell you. And although I hate to say it, you may have been right when you suggested that what Donald Trump is doing is absolutely unconscionable and wrong. And I happen to agree with you. And I hope that there are ways to put constraints on him.
There is another news story that I think reflects the fact that different groups and constituencies are seizing this moment. It's a moment of weakness in America. You may see it as strength because Trump reps like he's a big, strong guy, and we're going to do this, and we're going to go after you, and I'm going to sue you and sue them. And they, as a result, in government, in the Trump administration, get a lot of people surrendering to them. I get that kind of strength. But the world sees weakness, and they see instability in America right now. And one of the groups that sees it is the Taliban. The Taliban is wanting to reestablish official ties and a presence in the United States. This is a series of conversations that have gone on between this administration and the Taliban. And in talks with American officials in Kabul, the Taliban representatives are attempting to begin a government officially recognized by the U.S. that will be Talibanese, you know.
Absolutely shocking, appalling, unconscionable. Ask any woman who has come out of Afghanistan, who is seeing what's happening there, you know that it's unconscionable. And all the criticism that the Trump people keep making of the Afghanistan withdrawal, I don't know how they could justify it based on their own rhetoric. I mean,
well, just on that point, I mean, you always hear about this. Oh, that Biden screwed up the pullout from Afghanistan. The Afghanistan pullout was all wrong. That deal to get out of Afghanistan, made with the Taliban, was made by who?
Donald
Rothmann.
J. Trump.
Donald J. Trump, exactly. And he actually had a deadline on it. In other words, he said, we will be, by agreement with you, the Taliban, American troops will be gone by such and such a date. And the date stipulated was a date that would be under the Biden administration. So he really saddled Biden with this and then did a bunch of things that really undercut the administration's ability to exit from Afghanistan in any kind of way that would minimize the kind of risk that we saw.
Mark, so, I should point out, as you are speaking, in 1 hour, Donald Trump will hold a press conference in the Rose Garden. Let me remind you, he's about to cement over the Rose Garden, a great historical part of the White House. This is a man who's going to stand up and announce tariffs. Already, the Prime Minister of Canada, I don't know if you have the sound on it, but maybe you'll play it at another time, is blasting Donald Trump. Essentially, it's a declaration of war. And the fact that the Republicans, again, I come back to the Republicans in the House and in the Senate, are rolling over and playing dead on this will come back to haunt them. And the sooner, the better.
Lastly, I'm going to just take up you might consider this sort of along the edges of stuff going on in Washington. But, you know, they have this White House Correspondents' Dinner, and they typically have a comedian booked in, kind of a host, an MC, and the comedian does a chunk of stuff.
Yeah. The media should refuse to attend, period.
And why is that?
Because it is a joke. The whole dinner, which, you know, it's not like the Gridiron Dinner, which is a Washington tradition, well-established. In this case, it is the White House effort to manipulate White House correspondents. And White House correspondents should know better. The same thing, may I say, applies to the fact that the AP, the Associated Press, which we use in our news coverage, which Kim uses in her news coverage regularly, has not only been banned from the White House, but is banned from the press pool. Why? Because they still refer to it as the Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of America. You know, I keep thinking that if my old friend and colleague Helen Thomas were alive, she would be spitting fire at this point. I regret that she's not here to do what we have to do, which is to affirm the idea of freedom of the press. Mark, they're going to control, the White House wants to control who can sit in the newsroom at the White House, who will be accredited and who will not. This is a blow to our position that is beyond comprehension. And speaking as someone who has been a part of the media, as you are a part of the media, this is something which we absolutely must reject completely. And if that means White House correspondents say, okay, we'll put 3 people in to cover you from now on. That's it. It's over. And he can go to the right-wing press all he wants. But I can only tell you this. It is, to me, as you have pointed out properly, the White House Correspondents' Dinner has been completely perverted by Donald Trump.
Well, this is, and you know, I was never a fan of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You've heard me rail against it. I think it's an absolute, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it. I know
disgrace.
Well, it's a disgrace because it's a self-congratulatory bunch of bullshit. And the fact is that the playing field has changed. The glad handing and the sort of momentary rapprochement between White House officials, government officials, and the press, it exists in this world. The White House Correspondents' Dinner, they've turned it into a red carpet. It's become a kind of a media event, and I understand why. You have brilliant comedians. You've got the Kimmels, the Colberts of the world, Seth Meyers, etc. You had Larry Wilmore. I mean, you had so many great comics up there doing big chunks, and it is wildly entertaining. There's a sense of kind of getting away from the oftentimes depressing world of Washington politics. But the landscape has changed, and now I don't see this as anything more than self-congratulatory.
And White House correspondents ought to say no.
Yes,
they
exactly.
Ought to just say,
I think they should
"We are not
disband
going
it.
to
They
attend."
should disband the entire thing.
Yeah.
As I say, I was never a fan.
Or may I say, if they really want to have an impact, rent a different place, make it not black tie, and simply meet as a group to discuss the major issues that confront the media in this country.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, Mark, I posted on my Facebook page some material about KGO, and I received an overwhelming response. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see the comments people have made about the fact that we are not there, that we no longer can be heard. And there is a deep distress on the part of many of our former listeners who believe that the ability to interact, to debate, to discuss these issues is absolutely critical. And although you are doing yeoman service, and I try to do the same in my podcasts, it is not the same reach as a KGO with 50,000 watts. And by the way, those 50,000 watts are now being used by our former employer, Cumulus, as KSFO now, and as a right-wing talking head point. When I want to hear what Sean Hannity is saying or Mark Levin is saying, I can simply now turn to the 50,000 watt former KGO that is now KSFO. And I'll never say it again because I don't want to plug it. But Mark, it is one of the great American tragedies that talk radio is dead. The idea of interaction, the idea of people dissenting, the idea of being able to raise these issues is so critical. And we are in a real moment of stress because it doesn't exist.
You can find John Rothmann on his podcast. It's called Around the Political World with John Rothmann. He's here on Wednesdays. John, love you. Come visit.
Yep, may I just say, and you can find this podcast, Mark Thompson's podcast, but only if you support it. And as Mark just indicated, the last month or two, I guess you've had a bit of a tough time. So if you believe that what Mark Thompson is doing and what we who are contributing, who are not paid for our contribution, we come on voluntarily, that you want to support this kind of effort, you must now click on, hey, put it up there on the screen so everybody can see where they can click up. It's more important than plugging my podcast. I really believe that this is a very important moment, and what Mark is doing is so important and needs to be supported. And I don't just say it because he's my friend, and we may argue about certain things, but where else are you going to have the ability to articulate clearly and precisely? And let me tell you, it's right here on the Mark Thompson program.
The MarkThompsonShow.com, MarkThompsonShow.com, and you can click Patreon or PayPal links to contribute. That is what John is talking about. Thank you, John. You're very kind to mention that.
Not kind, necessary.
Thank you, pal. All the best to you, and we'll see you next Wednesday. John Rothmann, everyone.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.